Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Yvonne from Ginger Chick Rehab. I'm so glad to have you back today. And if you're visiting my channel for the first time, welcome. I do lots of DIYs, trash to treasure, furniture flips with my husband Chris, and thrifting adventures to fit into the farmhouse decor. So today I am participating with some great ladies in a home decor DIY collab. The host for this lovely event is Decor Easy, Janie, and her daughter Diane. So if you have not visited their channel, it will be down in my description box, so you can hop over and just check out what her and her daughter do. Oh my gosh, they do some farmhouse DIYs, they do wonderful vignettes. You sure should check out their channel. So along with the other 6 ladies, along with the host and me, we have Inspired Living with Krista, A Country Girl's Attic, Mom Does Life Handmade, Leasing Burningham, My Style, My Color, and Secondhand Tracey Ann. All the participants in this collab will be down in my description box along with the playlist. So don't forget to click on that playlist and sit back and get inspired by some home decor DIY.
So here's the little stool that I got off of Marketplace. I really thought it was like a padded stool, but when I realized it was just somebody had put some padding and put it over the top of it. And then this one, as you can see, a dog chewed on it, but I didn't care about that because I never keep the padding and fabric anyway, but I just absolutely love the details on this leg. Well, I guess at least on the bright side, then this was just easy to remove the padding and that fabric that was on there. Just a couple little pops of a tack and it was off. Well, I guess now that big crack is what I see and why they probably covered it up. And I almost would have left it painted, but that big crack, I wasn't going to mess with it and try to tear this apart. So I wish I could explain to you how heavy this bench is. I mean, it's so not very big bench, but that it's just a heavy base, and so all I had to do is unscrew, well, the screws that were left, they always seem to be half missing. So I just had to unscrew that padding off from the base. And now the fun part of removing staples and tacks. And the accordion was held down by some very rusted staples, and I could actually eventually just pull that up, and then the rest of it I had to remove the little tacks that were on there. And then there were some holes in the bottom of the board where they had buttons all the way through, but I wasn't going to mess with playing with buttons, but they were tacked onto, so I need to remove those also. So now to prep both of these pieces for paint, I'm going to use my crud cutter and just give them a thorough cleaning. Remember, if you watch my videos, I always say that you want to get any residue or anything off. And the nice thing about cleaning it like this also is, like, I could tell that, oh, this is a little bit loose, this needs a little bit more hammered in. You know, you can feel the wonkiness on any legs or anything like that. So that's really also another reason to try to clean the piece before also. So here on this little bench, I'm just using some CA glue just to tighten down those legs to make sure that they're nice and secure. You know, this is a little stool, so people will be sitting on it, standing on it, so I wanted to make it secure. So on the bigger piece, it had some added metal supports, and since they were all evenly spaced, I didn't mind them, and it was nice and tight that I just thought I would spray those with some Rust-Oleum flat black paint, and the little feet, as you see, were metal also. I was just afraid that my regular paint wouldn't stick as well, and I did not want any peeling to be going on my project. So even though the age of this wood, I really did like the patina, I'm still going to be painting this piece. It is kind of what it is, but I know that it is going to bleed through the white eventually, so I'm going to give it a couple coats of the shellac paint to seal it in so it doesn't bleed yellow through my white paint. And then I'm going to give both of these benches a couple coats of my black onyx ready to use paint that I get at Walmart. I just, you know, if you watch my channel, you know that I like to paint things black. And then I had flipped the board for the bigger bench over, and I'm going to paint the bottom of that black. I like, you know, the other board, the side was kind of yucky from taking all the tacks and stuff, and that's the nice thing is you can just flip the board over and paint it and it looks like you cut a new board. I know that there's holes in it from the buttons, but that's okay. So now that I've got my undercoat of black painted on both pieces, I'm ready to use my Kills Paint and Primer, and I use the flat white. I love the way that this distresses when I go to sand it. So now I'm just going to give, now on this little bench, I know that I'm going to oversand and distress it a lot because of just the age of the piece. It'll distress beautifully. So this one's only going to need a couple coats, but I know the bigger one's probably going to need at least 3 if not 4 coats. So instead of watching the paint dry, I'm going to go in and work on the seat cushions for the benches. Now I ordered this foam off of Amazon and I have good luck with it. I like the stiffness. I like that it's nice and sturdy, and like I said, I never usually ever keep any of the foam or fabric on something I have thrifted. Just makes me feel better, especially since I'm a reseller. So as you see, I just lay the board on the piece of foam, and then I take a Sharpie and I trace around it, and then I love to use an electric knife to cut this foam. It's such a dense foam, and then these electric knives just kind of cut it just like butter, and I can really stay on my line and try to make a nice even cut. So to make sure that the foam does not move around when I'm trying to reupholster it or when the people, you know, so I'm just going to use some spray adhesive, and this one was a Loctite that I'd gotten on a clearance at Meijer's, and so then I just put it right on, you know, spray it on and put the pad on and try to make sure that I've got everything nice and even and kind of apply some pressure to get it to stick. And then my next step on reupholstering this cushion is I'm using some quilt batting just to, you know, it kind of helps keep it yet again in place, and then it gives an extra layer of attaching it to the board. I try to do, I'm not a professional at this is just what I have learned over time. So, and actually I always end up getting able to thrift these packages of batting. So I'm just going to be using my electric staple gun to staple this onto the board. And now you want to pull it taut but not so tight that it puckers the foam. And then when you get to the corners of this, you just kind of fold them like a nice little package. And this is a pretty thin product, so you don't have to worry about it bulking up too much on the corners. I mean, you can just kind of feel that if it's too bulky, but it stretches. So now I'm on to my drop cloth fabric, and I'm just measuring out what my cut needs to be because, you know, they come in large pieces, and I really don't want to try to cut too much that I waste it. So I need to take this little seam off the piece. I mean, yeah, you could leave it, but because I'm stapling this onto a base, that would actually probably bulk up too much and make it uneven on the one side, so I needed to remove that. So here's a little trick I learned about cutting a square at the corner so that your corner pieces aren't so bulked up. So you just kind of, you're eyeballing basically, but you're not cutting all the way into, you know, the board or your foam. So you can see I left an inch, inch and a half to 2 inches, you know, whatever you're comfortable with. You don't want to cut all the way to the piece of the board or it will not fold over and you'll have a gap that you're going to have to glue. But on the sides, I don't mind having a little bit extra fabric because I know that's where people sit and, you know, that's where it starts to wear out first. I mean, I do buy a very nice foam, but just a little bit extra fabric so I don't want anybody feeling that wood underneath there. I want it to be a nice soft sitting place. So remember when you're stapling it on, you want to pull it taut, but, and, you know, nice and tight, but you don't want it to pucker the foam that you've pulled it too tight. So I do love my electric staple gun, but soon into this project, it decided it was going to completely just die. It was a sad day. I probably had this thing, I think since my daughter was 3 and she's turning 21 since I reupholstered my first couch. What a sad day. So when you get to your corners, this is where it's nice that I cut off that extra fabric so it will lay nice and flat. And I don't have a lot of fabric that I have to try to smush in there. So I just kind of fold it over as like I'm doing a present package. It depends on how you wrap a present, but I like it to be nice and smooth and a little clean package, and I like to fold those ends over so there's no fraying on the outside. And then for the littler bench, I just had my husband cut a piece of plywood. You're not going to see this because it's going to be stapled onto the base. So I do the same thing. I cut the foam, I'm going to spray adhesive it on. And then here's where I'm applying the batting. I cut it to, what I thought was enough for the batting, and then cut the excess off. And here's where you see I had to switch to a different staple brad nailer. I'm not really sure what this tool's called. It hooks up to an air compressor, so it's a little bit heavy for me, so I'm gonna miss my staple gun, but I guess I may have to invest in another one. But at least I had a tool to complete this job. So the same thing with the drop cloth, linen fabric. I'm just folding it over, making it nice and taut, folding those edges under so you don't get any fraying, and then just stapling it away. So now that I have both of the paddings done, it's on to going out. The paint should be thoroughly dry now. And actually I did this in like 1-2 days. So, other than, the nice thing about hotter weather is paint does dry faster. So I'm just taking the electric sander, and then I'm gonna actually heavily distress because I'd really like to see some more of that dark wood underneath this piece. And for the bigger piece, I am going to hand sand it. If I use the rotary sander, I'm afraid it would take way too much off, and I really wanted to emphasize on all these little edges and all this little detail on here. I know it takes more time, but I'm okay with that. I really always love how I can pop those details out of a piece when I'm distressing it. And then to finish both of these pieces off, I am going to give them a protective coat of the Varathane Finishing Wax. I really like to protect, especially since I paint white. It just seals that paint in, especially since it's a flat paint. And you don't have to because it's a paint and primer, but I like the way it leaves it, how it feels, and I like the way it makes it smell. So this is where my husband Chris is going to attach the padded tops to the bottoms, and for this one he's going to have to pre-drill some holes because this is not how it was attached to begin with, and then he will just put some screws in it and make it nice and secure. And then for the bigger bench, you can see how much bigger that top is, that you really want to try to center it, do some measurements before. And the nice thing about flipping that board over too is you don't have to use those same holes, because sometimes those holes strip out, and that's why it tends to lose its screws. So it is nice this way, because then now I know that base is nice and secure, especially since I'm reselling it. Well, if this is your first time visiting my channel, those who have watched my channel before know I love to do grain sack stripes. So welcome to the world of grain sack stripes. So here I am finding center for my first piece of masking tape, and for this one I'm using my smaller piece. And then what I do is I put one in the center, and then I'm going to lay a regular size masking tape on both sides of the first piece, and then I'm going to remove that first piece, and that'll be where my first painting of my stripe goes. So I am using Apple Barrel multi-use black paint to paint my stripes. This nice thing about this multi-use paint is when I iron it in, it becomes one in the fabric, and then I always seal it with Scotch Guard. I'm just pre-telling you this. This is what has worked for me doing these fabrics, and it has stayed really well. So to apply the paint, I'm just using a sponge makeup applicator that I get at the dollar store. And then I just, you don't want to put too much paint on it, but depending on your linen drop cloth, I find that some of them take differently than others. So you kind of just have to see what works for you to get that paint in. But I know you don't want to press hard and smush it underneath the paint. Here's always the fun part when you get to remove that paint and see how good your stripe is. So for my next stripe, I take a regular size piece of masking tape, and I usually buy this masking tape at the dollar store because, you know, why not? You're throwing it away, and it sticks to the fabric really well. So as you see, I'm lining it up with the one side of the black that I painted, and then that'll be my little bit of a gap, you know, but I'm kind of eyeballing and making sure that it's even all the way through. So then I do that on the other side, so there's a little bit of gap. So the middle has two pieces of tape overlapping at each other. And then for my third and fourth piece of the tape, I'm just kind of eyeballing. Unfortunately, I've done this enough that I can kind of eyeball, and then I just make sure my tape's even. I kind of guesstimate how big I want my stripe to be. And then, like I said, you just want to eyeball and make sure it's even. And if, you know, you can take a measuring tape too to make sure that it's a little bit, you know, if you're a little insecure about that, but I'm okay with eyeballing. So then you can see where my painted stripes turned out, and I'm going to add one more. You could leave it like that, but I like to make each one of my pieces a little bit different than the one I've done before, so I'm going to add one more stripe, a little bit thinner stripe to the outer edge here. So I taped off using the masking tape, trying to make sure that I had the same kind of size of gap, eyeballing, and then I'm going to put a little littler stripe on the outside. So here's the part where I was talking about how I take an iron, and I always use parchment paper. I don't want to get the paint on my iron. I don't want to burn my fabric accidentally. So I like that barrier, the parchment paper. I'm not really sure if it would melt on or not, but I'm not tempting it. You know, I don't want to waste my product. And so when you put that iron on this and on that paint, it just melts it or blends it with the fabric, because you can tell that paint on top of that is hard and crusty, doesn't feel so good to be able to sit on, but once you've ironed it in it, it is nice and smooth, just like what the fabric feels like. I always forget to mention at the beginning, as soon as I bring a drop cloth home, I automatically put it in the washer and wash it and dry it, so when I'm ready to use it, it's all ready. But to seal, I always seal in and Scotch guard my upholstery products, especially since it's a light fabric. I love to protect, and especially since I'm resealing, I love to protect my fabric. So for this bigger piece, what I'm going to do is I'm putting this huge masking tape that I get at the Dollar General, and I'm just putting that from the edge so I have a guideline. I'm going to work from the sides out in, I guess, from the sides in to do my striping. So here is what I'm doing. I'm going to be doing multiple stripes on this, so if you want to fast forward, I understand, but I will show you the process of each and every one of the stripes that I'm doing. So for my first stripe, I want it to be a small stripe. So like I said, I just eyeball, and I'm going to, like I said, multiple stripes. So it's the same process. I'm going to put my tape on, and then I'm going to use my apple barrel paint, and then you see how I kind of slide that a little bit, then bounce. Just, it's whatever the fabric will kind of take. Sometimes the bounce takes darker than I want it to, so I'm just going to remove that first piece of tape. I'm not taking the outer piece off quite yet. The nice thing about masking tape is you can see through it, especially that black. So I put another piece of masking tape on over it, guesstimated, you know, made my little area where it will not have paint, and then I'm making a little bit smaller stripe for the stripe in, and then now I'm going to remove both of all the tape. So for my next stripe, I'm just using that same piece of masking tape, and I'm really concentrating on the space that's going to be left unpainted. And so for this one, I'm going to try to kind of make a 1/2 inch stripe or a 3/4 stripe, and see how I keep working it in until I get a bigger stripe, and then I'm going to work back out. So I have, you know, the semi small at the end, the smaller, the larger, the largest, and then now I'm going to work back down. And here when I'm doing those, I will measure. So the little stripes, you know, you can kind of be off a little bit, but the bigger stripes I definitely thought would stick out more, so I wanted to make sure that I was keeping them measured properly on my way to when I'm matching up other stripes. For the center of this, I am going to go to my silhouette, and I'll kind of display in the description of what I did. So I'm actually taking some of the designs from my silhouette design store, and then I'm going to be taking them apart to make a stencil for the chair. So I know it's a little bit complicated about, if you're not with a Cricut or a silhouette. I just didn't want that black back space. So actually I'm taking a few different of the designs and then using them for the pieces and parts of them that I want to use, along with a rooster and a chicken and some words. So I'll kind of show you here how I can put that design off to the side. I can uncompound it, which means it'll release all those images, and then I can just take that hen chicken out that I want, and then I want to turn her horizontal and going the other way. And then for the words, I'm just going to use this Feed and See code and just add it to the bottom of the rooster and the hen and that greenery. So then to get that outer circle that I wanted from this design, I have to go in and I have to release it. Then I have to also release it from the compound. I'm sorry that it is complicated. I know it, and it's taken me a lot of YouTube videos to learn how to do this. But then I have to go back in and delete all the stuff that I do not want. And that is time consuming, I know, but for my design it is worth it, because it would be really hard for me to make a circle and center it as nice as this design is. So I just go in and delete all the stuff I want or I don't want. And then what I do is when I get my outer circles left over, I go in and I group them together, and then I copy and paste them, because I'm on another pad that lets you do multiple mats. And so then I copy and paste it and then add it to my design around my leaf. I know that it's complicated, but I thought I'd give you a quick version if you wanted to try to play with it yourself if you have one of these machines. So here's the design all put together with all those pieces and parts of the other designs, and now I'm going to cut it out on some permanent vinyl. Do not use removable, because it will not stick to fabric, and usually I like to, but I didn't want to mess with freezer paper today. So I guess it doesn't really matter which paper you use, it's both time consuming. So even this, on a hot day, the permanent vinyl was a little bit time consuming, but here I am just taking it and making sure before I put it onto my fabric that it is centered as best of my ability, and then I can remove that transfer tape and have the image. I do actually feel like when you use freezer paper and iron on, it's a little bit tighter to the fabric, so I probably should have done that, but I already had cut this image, so I will use what I cut. And so I'm using the same thing like I used on the other, the multi-use, but this one I'm doing a dark granite. And then I'm applying it with that makeup sponge that I got at the dollar store. And you kind of, like I said, each drop cloth linen, I find it accepts paint differently. So you don't want to have a lot that you're smushing it underneath your stencil by any means. But if you have to dab or kind of slide gently, just to get that fabric on. And I just do one coat usually. You can kind of eyeball where you might need to add a little bit more, because it's supposed to look like aged grain sack. So one coat is fine. So how excited do you all get when you start to take your stencil off? So you're like, you got that little bit of nervous that you had bleed under, or you're like, oh my gosh, it clean lines. I just love, this is that nervous happy of removing your stencil. So I'll finish this bench up just like I did the other bench. I will take some parchment paper, I will iron that paint in so it's nice and smooth and not crusty, and I will take it outside and spray a generous coat of the Scotch Guard to protect that fabric.
So I thank you so much for watching today's video. I hope I have inspired you in any way to look at benches another way when you're out thrifting or you see them for sale at Marketplace. Don't forget to go down in my description and click on that link for Decor Easy, Janie and Diane's channel, along with the other 6 participants in this collab. Again, I thank you so much for watching, and I thank you if you're part of my YouTube family. But if you'd like to become part of my YouTube family, please consider hitting that subscribe button. Thank you so much.